As today is our last day in our series on loving our neighbors. It's the last week of Epiphany, the season that has helped us understand more and more about the character of Jesus and revealed his humanity. Later this very week, we move into Lent, into this time of turning our focus toward the cross. But today's story takes us on a wild ride, on this trek up a mountain with best friends where we see Jesus' undeniable divinity, and it brings together heaven and earth. Here again from Mark chapter 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and he led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such that no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. So 6 days before this moment, Jesus had told the disciples that he was going to die, but they hadn't really heard it. They'd been listening, but it was one of several times to come when they didn't quite get it. So Jesus invites Peter and James and John to go up this mountain away from the rest of the group, and then transfigures before them. With his clothes whiter than anyone else could have made them, and then these two figures, Moses and Elijah, they appear. If there had been any doubt to this point about who Jesus was, if any of these previous epiphanies had seemed too discreet, this one blows them out of the water and says, "Hello, the power of God is here. Heaven and earth are united. The spiritual realm is in your presence, and you're invited into it." Jesus' humanity and divinity, both fully God and fully man, dwelling in both the earthly and the spiritual, they're made clear in this spectacular moment. Moses and Elijah are there as those two great prophets who'd had their own amazing encounters with God. Moses had heard from God in that bush that didn't burn, and Elijah had received fire from God on the altar, drenched in water to win that wager with the prophet of Baal. Those two experiences, like this moment of transfiguration, are quite unexplainable and supernatural. They're mysterious, and they fill us with awe and wonder. Do you remember in the Lord's Prayer where it says, "Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven"? What we're getting here is a glimpse into that future. Theologian N.T. Wright says, "Thy kingdom come is like two hands folding together, the earthly and the spiritual becoming one." Jesus had been showing us the new kingdom that he was bringing about, the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, but we miss it. And the disciples missed it too. Look at verse 5. Peter says to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for you." He didn't really know what to say, for they were terrified. Well-meaning, sweet but misguided Peter jumps into action. He's afraid. He doesn't really know what to say, but he says something anyway, and he offers to start building tents, temporary tabernacles where Jesus, Moses, and Elijah could stay. But there they are in this incredible moment, experiencing the mystery of the divine, and Peter can't just be in the moment. Instead, he feels like he needs to jump into action. I know I've been there. You probably have too. There are just times when we encounter the divine and we can't stand it. We just can't stay there and be. So instead, we interrupt those moments of mystery for needless action. What would it look like if we were all better at moving into deeper encounters with the divine and embracing the mystery and awe of those kind of moments? Mystery and awe-filled moments are around us all the time, not just high in the sky on the mountaintop kinds of places, but right here in our daily living. But we can miss them. There's a consciousness required and a slowing down that's necessary to not miss the thin places around us. Celtic Christians have long called a thin place a realm where heaven and earth meet. The church attempts to help us notice the mystery and wonder around us, True communal spirituality, a shared church experience, can be about training all of us to look into that mystery as individuals and as a community. It can be about training all of us to welcome it together, but that kind of work can't be filled with ego or fear or unease or distrust. That kind of depth and awareness takes practice and discipline, consciousness, and a healthy sense of awe and wonder. Over this Epiphany season, we've thought about what it means to love our neighbors, and it can be hard. People are difficult and can be difficult to love. But if we could be people who develop the ability to sit in awe and wonder of God, to take in the spiritual and let it bump up against our earthly realms, and then not feel rushed to name it or explain it or dissect it, then we could experience the greatest truths that God has to offer. We could see mystery and love it. We could begin to crave it. And we'd be better able to love our neighbors because we could marvel at God and all of God's creation, the spiritual and the earthly, as they intertwine mysteriously. It's a spiritual practice to marvel at God, and when we do, then we can better accept our neighbors for who they are and where they are in their own spiritual journeys, even when they are sweet but misguided. This journey of a spiritual life is one that keeps taking us deeper and deeper, from one place of seemingly sure footing to another. We leap from one place until that one holds us no longer, and then we can leap again as we accept more of God's mystery for us. Anne Lamott writes of it as lily pads, round and green, places where we're summoned and then held as we grow. Each lily pad preparing us for the next, helping us move across a swamp of doubt and fear. Looking back, we can see it was a flimsy and indirect path that we traveled, but each step brought us closer to the pad of faith that keeps us afloat today. So we leap onto a lily pad and wobble and shift, and it holds us for a while until we realize it isn't strong enough to support us anymore, and as it begins to slip away, we leap to the next, and it holds us for a time. This process of moving deeper and deeper, of growing more in tune with the divine presence, that's faith. It requires us to let go of that which we think we know and to let it slip away, trusting that with the next leap and the next, we will be received in love, held in care, and taken to deeper depths than we could have previously imagined. As we walk this journey of faith, we become more able to love our neighbors, to accept their own processes and journeys of faith, and to accept God's love of ourselves and of them. We embrace the spiritual and the earthly in ourselves and in others and begin to bring those together. Peter, he rushed too quickly to name what was happening, to jump into action, and he tries to build those tents, and he starts operating out of an earthly realm when he is firmly in a spiritual one. And that's not terrible. It's just misguided. And honestly, I picture Jesus taking a big, deep sigh here, knowing this moment could have been so much more. Peter just missed the larger point. He doesn't show the capacity to sit in awe, which means he carries more fear than he ought. Scripture does say he and Peter and James are terrified because it just seems like too much. They don't yet know how to embrace that spiritual realm. So Jesus just sighs. Jesus has been showing them. They've been walking together, watching him closely, listening to him, and yet they miss it. The connection between the spiritual realm impacts the earthly one. Watch what happens when the disciples are unaware. These are the scenes that follow in the rest of the chapter. They come down the mountain and they walk into a scene with other disciples arguing with the scribes about what to do with a spirit-possessed boy. Jesus steps in and heals him. They can't understand, how did this happen? They're dumbfounded. And Jesus just sighs. This could have been so much more. Then Jesus foretells his death, but the disciples again don't understand what he's talking about, and they just start saying a bunch of words about Elijah and death, and Jesus just sighs. This moment could have been so much more. Then, as the disciples walk on, they start arguing about who is the greatest in God's kingdom, and they're gifting themselves titles. And again, Jesus just sighs. This could have been so much more. Then the disciples stumble upon some of Jesus' followers who are serving and helping the sick. Yet the disciples shut it all down and proclaim, they were trying to act like you, Jesus, so we stopped them. And you can see Jesus. If they aren't against us, they're for us. This could have been so much more. Scene after scene after scene. The disciples miss the bigger meaning of what's unfolding. They are in the presence of the divine, yet they miss it. Because they haven't yet developed the inner strength to see it or be in the presence of mystery. And it affects how they love their neighbor and the capacity that they have for their neighbors. The same is still true today. Loving our neighbors requires a healthy awareness of the spiritual. And even though Jesus is obviously frustrated with his disciples throughout the whole chapter, he loves them anyway. He engages them anyway. He lives with them and does ministry with them anyway. When you develop a deeper, more contemplative spirituality, then you're able to make room for people. When you live out of that spiritual realm, then you don't feel competition with others. And you won't let their anxiety stick to you either. If we are rooted deeply on the inside, then we have the capacity to love our neighbors because we don't feel threatened by them or in competition with them. We can just hold them for who they are and how they are. We might see places where they are now that we once were too, and we can have compassion and continue moving to something more, something deeper, something truer. A willingness to embrace the mystery and hold both the earthly and spiritual realms hand in hand makes it possible. This is the way that we can hold that which we hate or don't understand, because we hold it in the light of love. The earthly realm can't do this, but God can, and Spirit can, and we are called to be people who live and move and have our being in spirit. I hope we can learn to do this well, so that our moments of lingering regret, this could have been so much more moments, are few and far between. But the moments of bringing heaven and earth together will prevail and enable us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves.